Today is October 28th, and this is the ADM Investor Services Weekly Market Wrap-Up. Please note that the views and opinions expressed here today are solely those of our guests and should not be construed as the views or opinions of ADM Investor Services or Archer Daniels Midland Company. Today's guests are Alan Bush, the Senior Financial Economist at ADMIS, and Steve Freed, ADMIS's Vice President of Grain Research. Steve, let's start with the grain markets. While corn remains to be trading in a fairly tight range, the soybeans seem to be trending higher of late. Do you feel prices are near the fundamental values? Lend us your thoughts on what you expect to see from here.
Well, I think that we've kind of overpriced some of the fundamentals. I think this week we saw China come in and buy some beans. We also saw some spec buying because of some wet weather in Argentina. But I think value to me is more like 980 in a trading range between 940 and 1020. So these levels at around 1020 I think are too high. As far as corn is concerned, we're still in this 320 to maybe 380 trading range with 350 as the midpoint of that range, and we're kind of hanging around there. I think in general traders are disappointed that the funds were active buyers of corn this week and we only rallied 5 cents.
How's it look at the elevators? Are farmers continuing to bring grain to the market? Any thoughts on this, and what's the storage situation look like?
Well, it's interesting in that the farmers are not selling. They sold pretty much what they want to sell. They've got this government crop insurance payment, $7 billion was sent out to them, and so they're trying to hold back on selling anything additional, especially at these prices. And I think that the storage situation is, it's surprisingly, but it looks like they're finding enough room for the record corn crop.
Speaking of the government, in less than 2 weeks, we'll have a new president-elect here in the United States. Will this impact grain prices? Will investment money move into the grains?
We've seen open interest this week go up about 8,000 contracts in corn, 26,000 contracts in meal, and 85,000 contracts in soybeans. And we backed off a little bit in the last few days in the beans, but it looks like this is new money that's coming from the equity market and coming from the energy markets and trying to get it to a safe haven in case there's a big knee-jerk reaction on an upset in the election, or even a follow-through on, no matter what happens, concern about the economy down the road of whoever gets elected.
Staying with the grain, Stephen, looking at other parts of the globe, you've commented about too much rain in Argentina this month. What's the impact and what is the forecast for South America?
Well, first of all, 20% of the Argentina growing areas has seen 8 inches of rain since the 1st of October. And so they're talking about flooding in areas that don't normally flood. And this probably is a little early to get concerned about it because they've got about 30, maybe 35% of the corn planted, and they don't start planting beans until November. Next week the forecast is drier, so I think in general the conditions down there should improve.
Before I move over to Alan, China, did the drop in Chinese currency cause an increase in China soybean buying this week?
We think they did. They've been averaging the last 4 weeks of 70 million bushels of beans mined from the United States. Their crush margins are pretty favorable, but I think with the yuan at 6-year lows, that I think that has triggered them to come in and price open sales.
How does this compare with years past in regard to Chinese buying?
This is a record pace. They usually start dropping off at the end of November once they see the South American crops are okay. They do buy more from South America as far as beans than the United States. But I think people are a little bit concerned that last year you had such a bad weather year for South America that they had to come in and buy more from the United States. So right now it's record trading, and I think they're a little bit concerned about another South American weather problem.
What about the Brazilian real? Did the rally in this currency make them less competitive toward the U.S.?
Could be. I think that they really don't have a lot of supplies from last year's crop to be competitive at this time. Especially in corn, the market's expecting them to have a bigger crop and be more competitive, but that may not be until our harvest in March and April. So we'll be watching pretty closely to see if they bounce back from last year's crops and if they become competitive down the road. But right now, the real is making them less competitive than the U.S.
Alan, turning toward the financial markets, while the S&P 500 and Dow futures have traded sideways since the middle of July, NASDAQ futures registered record highs on Tuesday. What's the outlook for the NASDAQ futures now?
Well, the outlook for the NASDAQ is still higher. Nothing has changed there. I would expect NASDAQ futures to advance all the rest of this year, probably well into next year as well. Now, while the S&P and the Dow have traded sideways, I think that ultimately we will break out to the upside, and I would expect some new highs for the move as well in both the Dow and S&P futures, possibly in the first quarter of next year, but I would think it's safe to say at least within the first half of next year, new highs for the S&P and also Dow futures.
I asked Steve about the impact of the upcoming election on grains. Will there be an impact on the stocks? Do you have thoughts on this?
Well, I think the volatility will tend to increase in the form of the VIX might be a little more volatile, but I think ultimately it's the interest rate influence that dominates. No matter who wins, whoever is at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue next year, stock index futures will continue to advance. And so I would focus on the interest rate outlook more than anything else. That has been the dominant influence, and it will continue to be so. So I would not place too much emphasis on who wins. The main trend for the indices still appears to be higher.
Here's a subject that we don't talk about much. The Australian dollar has performed very well against the greenback this year. What's the current outlook on the Aussie dollar, and should we care?
Well, I think the Australian dollar will continue to advance. It's put in a pretty good performance this year. It also looks like the Reserve Bank of Australia may be holding off on another rate cut. Also, it appears that China's economy is improving, and that will probably be another supportive factor for the Australian dollar. So I would be a buyer on any mild weakness, anywhere between 75 and 75.50 on the Australian dollar contract in the December. However, I think even a better trade would be long Australian, short Canadian. I think that's a very good spread. It has worked. I think it will continue to work.
You mentioned interest rates and their impact on the stock market. Looking at interest rates, yesterday the 30-year T-bond plummeted to a 6-month low. What is the outlook for T-bond futures now?
Okay, well, even today there's another new low, actually just by one tick, but another new low for the move in the bonds. Our belief is that the Fed, of course, will probably raise either in December or maybe next year. I'm somewhat in the minority thinking maybe next year, but in any event, it's inflation that will be the dominant factor that pressures the long end of the curve, the 30-year Treasury bond futures. So any rallies should be used as selling opportunities. I would say a point and a half, possibly 2 points would be enough. So continue to trade the shorts in the bonds. There's, I think, a lot left price-wise and time-wise.
I have one more very important question for both of you. I want to talk a little bit about droughts, but not in the weather frame of mind. In baseball, very big weekend here in Chicago. Will the Cubs win the World Series, and is this the end of the 108-year drought?
Well, I'm not sure about the outcome, but I'm looking ahead toward next year for the Chicago White Sox.
I think everybody hopes in Chicago that the Cubs win because they're due.
All right. Remember, the views and opinions expressed here today on this video are solely those of our guests and should not be construed as the views or opinions of ADM Investor Services or Archer Daniels Midland Company. If you'd like more information about the brokerage services offered at ADMIS or would like to open a trading account, please visit www.admis.com.